Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about my first impressions of the Call of Duty Vanguard Alpha, and I regret to inform you that I did not have a good time with my first couple hours playing this game. The game does a few things well, but for the most part it's not in good shape. So while we will be talking about the good things today and giving compliments where compliments are due, there are unfortunately a lot of glaring issues and quite a lot of small issues as well. For example, these spawns.
There, you got under 10 lives left.
What was that? Okay, that's a spawn.
You got 10.
So yeah, most of today's video is going to be spent delivering criticism, but we're going to do that after the NordVPN ad. Oh, Japan, you never cease to amaze me with your animations.
Hey, what's going on in here?
I use nordvpn.com/drifter to change my region to Japan so that I can watch all the furry animes early. In case you didn't know, Netflix has a totally different catalog depending on what region of the world you're connecting from, so connecting to other regions can open up new shows.
I've heard of NordVPN. They have over 5,200 servers in 60 countries, so you can access the internet almost anywhere.
Since we're in Texas and Binance is restricted here, I use nordvpn.com/drifter to change my region to a different state, and I opened up a Binance account, and by the way, I invested all of our retirement savings in SafeMoon, so we're good to go.
I like how you're always thinking about our future. But I gotta ask, you're watching furry anime and you're wearing a Sonic costume. Is that your persona?
No, I appreciate the compliments on the costume, but what I'm really doing today is I'm celebrating how lightning fast NordVPN is. It's one of the fastest VPNs on the market, and you can double VPN at the same speed, and you can have it running on up to 6 devices. It'll even support watching 4K 60 Netflix, which is just downright awesome.
That sounds really nice. I should definitely get NordVPN so I can play all the new video games early by changing my region to New Zealand.
Good thinking. That's one of my favorite tricks. When you do get NordVPN, be sure to go to nordvpn.com/drifter and enter code DRIFTER to save 73% off of your purchase, plus 4 months for free. That is the best possible deal you're going to get anywhere on YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed the little skit, but all jokes aside, a VPN is an essential tool for internet security. Not only does it protect your privacy, but it unlocks a ton of other features that you can get on the internet simply from region changing. If you want to get NordVPN, go to nordvpn.com/drifter, use code DRIFTER, and save yourself 73% off of this product, plus 4 months free. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this little skit. Let's get back to the video. Before we get started, I think it's very important to talk about my biases as a creator because I do have a Call of Duty Creator code with Activision. That is a legal partnership and business arrangement, and I am lucky enough to be invited to early preview events quite frequently, so I do have some bias there. I also admit that I wasn't particularly excited about Vanguard having a World War II setting to begin with this year, but I was willing to put that aside and kind of deal with it. I'm personally suffering from COD fatigue pretty bad. After like 15 years of playing this game, I'm getting close to burned out on it. And a very important one for today's video, the gameplay you're seeing is from a PS4 Pro instead of a PS5. And I know you guys are thinking I'm crazy, but I migrated over to PC about 2 years ago, and I didn't have a desire to spend, well, you could say $500 for a PlayStation 5, but given their lack of availability, you'll probably spend $1,000 or more to get one. So it just didn't seem worth it to me. And the reality is that 75 to 80% of COD gamers are going to be playing on Xbox One or one version of the PlayStation 4 or another, so what you're seeing is far more representative of what the base player base is going to get. And I also realize I'm back on controller instead of keyboard and mouse for the first time in a long time because I wanted to see what that experience is like. So I do realize I have the deck stacked against me here. I'm playing on an older system, I'm playing on controller, which I'm a bit unfamiliar with, and I wasn't super feeling it to begin with, so I do have my biases. So let's start off with the first good thing, sliding and moving. So let's start off with some good stuff first. I think that sliding while mounted is actually a sensible mechanic that's reasonably well integrated. You're not as accurate if you're sliding while mounting. You have to sit still to get the full mounted accuracy benefit. If you slide while mounting, it seems half, maybe quarter as effective, which is realistic in a sense, and that's a word that I attribute very lightly to Call of Duty games, but it's not cheesy like everybody thought it would be. Everybody thought you could just slide around and just laser people in Warzone, but that doesn't seem to be the case. On top of this, most of the places that you have a good opportunity to mount are porous cover and or destructible cover, so you'll get absolutely wasted. People don't even have to aim for your head. They can hit your body pretty easily. The next thing is that the blind fire over objects seems reasonably integrated as well. You can only blind fire vertically over objects and not around the side, and it's only on some objects as well. You have to slide up, you get really close, and then you can hit a button to blind fire over the side. You can't see what you're shooting at very well, but you can do it a bit, and it does appear to be hipfire only as far as I can tell. Not a lot of people were really doing this in-game. It's all new. It's going to take some time for it to settle to see if it's really good or bad, but both of these mechanics worked better than I thought they would. They weren't cheesy, they give me more combat options, and they do appear to have counters that don't break the game, so I'm very happy with that. I'm also happy with the fact that the movement, the sliding, the climbing, the mantling, and all that's very similar to Modern Warfare 2019 because it's running on the same engine, so all of that is pretty much good to go. Speaking of the Modern Warfare 19 engine, we're going to be talking about that a lot today. The engine is doing its job to make this game look much more realistic than, say, Treyarch Call of Duty's. It looks like a World War II reskin of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the remake, which I think is a good thing. If you're playing on PlayStation 5, then those changes will be very prevalent. The graphics look very good on PlayStation 5, in my opinion. I've seen some gameplay from that system. I've watched other streamers play, and PlayStation 5 graphics are very much so on point. They're beautiful in a sense. They're realistic. They're a bit dark. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But overall, graphically speaking, the game looks very good. Unless you're playing on a PlayStation 4, kind of like I am. And while there are details and aspects of the graphics that are very good on older consoles, it has some major limitations that we'll talk about later in the bad section. This also means, since we're using the same engine, that the Modern Warfare 2019 gun mechanics are back, which is great. That game had good gunfights, good gun mechanics. It's very similar feeling to that. Even weapon attachments seem very similar to the Modern Warfare 19 ones, and even if they're a little bit anachronistic, I'm okay with that. I swear the long-range zoom scope on the bar and the Kar 98 that you customize is the exact same or a slightly reworked 3x from Modern Warfare 2019, and I have a feeling that they are starting to create these attachments from the ground up with the idea of use in Warzone so that they can easily transition instead of having to do a whole bunch of custom options and then like rework them like they had to do with Black Ops Cold War. So even though they're anachronistic and it's similar to the old game, I'm totally okay with that because I still think that they're good. Next up, the perks are more balanced than most Call of Duty game perks. For example, Ghost only works while you're moving, so I'm totally on board with that one as well. And they just generally seem to be designed to break up the camper meta a little bit. There doesn't seem to be any overpowered or easily abusable perks, except it is really nice to have, I call it Tac Mask, where you don't get stunned quite as easily. That one's pretty crutch. The team did do a good job making sure that the maps do have more destruction than usual. We'll talk about that quite a bit later, but there is more things to shoot, more things to bust, more things to knock down and explore on the map than a typical Call of Duty game. And at this point, I'm kind of out of the good part. I've kind of exhausted my goodness for the day. So now we're going to move over to talking about the bad things. And I think the majority of the good things that I had to say were related to the Modern Warfare 2019 engine. So first up, number one thing I don't like is that spawns are not good. I didn't even play a super long time this morning because I ended up getting frustrated with the game. But in the couple of games I did play, things like this started happening to me. What? I wish I could say that this was the only time it happened. I think it happened one, two, maybe two more times. So it happened to me a couple of other times over a few short games. And the issue with this is that the maps are pretty small because we're playing 2v2 and or 3v3. So you do have a higher chance of getting bad spawns, but with only a few players on the map, I don't know why it spawns people nearly on top of each other, nearly inside of each other, looking at each other. That second clip you saw where I was like kind of ADSing apparently on the enemy, I actually did not see that enemy at all at that range because of a draw distance issue on the PlayStation 4 Pro, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, the maps are small, so that can happen, but it happened to me a lot in 2v2. I imagine it's going to happen a lot more in 3v3, and if we're doing a small map on 6v6, God forbid, I have no idea what's going to happen there. At this point, I would be remiss not to inform you that the PlayStation 4 doesn't look very pretty. You will notice that there is a significant graphical downgrade from PlayStation 5, and I think quite the opposite of PlayStation 5 gameplay, which I've seen. PlayStation 5 looks very nice. It looks like a beautiful game, and in a certain sense, for the aesthetic that they're trying to go for. But if you don't have $1,200 to pay to some scalper on eBay to get a PlayStation 5, you're going to be playing on an older console, or Xbox One X for that matter. So you're going to get downgrades in resolution, frame rate, potentially field of view. PlayStation 5 most notably seems to handle draw distance a lot better too. I noticed that I had a very difficult time spotting enemies at long ranges on PlayStation 4. Some of that is just because the resolution's lower, but it seems to slightly blur a bit or get more hazy, foggy kind of at longer ranges. And this is something that Call of Duty has done for a long time to save on rendering and keep that frame rate up. But at longer ranges, I really struggled to see people on PlayStation 4. I didn't get to play at 120 FPS, 60's fine though. And there's no field of view slider yet on PlayStation 5, though I imagine it'll be coming later, and it'll definitely be there on PC. When you combine all of these things together, along with the very dark aesthetics and graphics of the game, and the very loud and gaseous weapons that we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, you can have issues where you're basically shooting at red dots or clouds and can't see anything during long-range gunfights. For example, check out this bar fight. I can't, see what I'm shooting at. At that distance, I actually can't see my enemy.
Your team's eliminated.
I basically could not see what I was shooting at. Even when I pause and take a screenshot and zoom in, it's very difficult to see what I'm shooting at. As a YouTuber, I've had a lot of people tell me that I should be on PS5, I should buy a PlayStation 5, I should use my money to buy the next-gen consoles, but I didn't want to do that for this particular review. The reason is that the vast majority of players are still going to be on one version of the Xbox One or an older version of the PlayStation 4, and the chip shortages and PlayStation shortages are expected to continue well into next year. So a huge portion of the player base will be playing the game with the graphics that you see in front of you right now, and not the very nice ones that are available on next-gen consoles. Which brings me kind of to my next point. Graphics are one thing, but I think that more so than the graphics, the aesthetics bother me a lot. The game is dark, like very, very dark, Batman dark, depressing, gloomy looking. The color palette is 50 shades of brown. You've got dark brown, light brown, regular brown, tan brown, you've got gray, you've got dark, you've got darker, and then an overtone of sepia with everything, and it takes place at night or dusk or whatever, which, to be fair, is historically accurate because we all know the sun wasn't invented until 1948. All of World War II was fought completely in the dark, and we didn't have crops or anything until then. So I'm being a smart aleck here. I know that the other maps won't be like this. I know that there will be brighter and other stuff in different maps, but it's a rough start to play at night. And what this aesthetic choice does with the color palette and the lighting and all of that is it compounds all of the graphical issues that I had on the PlayStation 4, ultimately leaving me struggling to spot my enemies. A lot of my enemies, I noticed, probably on PlayStation 5, had no issues seeing me at similar ranges, so I could look and see nothing and they could spot me pretty quickly. So I genuinely felt like I was at a disadvantage there, and that doesn't even factor in all the muzzle flash and smoke and stuff, which makes it even harder at night. And I get that's realistic with older guns, but it's frustrating. Which reminds me, another frustrating thing is that upgrading weapons will add FMJ and or explosive rounds to them, depending on what kind of weapon you're upgrading. Both of these attachments seem to add spark spray effects, kind of like old Sledgehammer Incendiary. They don't burn you, but they make a lot of sparks and they spray, so when you shoot enemies, they just puff and hit all these sparks and stuff go flying. But instead of helping you kill enemies faster, that actually makes it harder for you to see the enemies and track them, because all these sparks and stuff end up getting on top of your hit markers or perhaps replacing your hit markers. And when people hit you with it, it sparks flying everywhere, and it just compounds the issue of not being able to see my enemies very clearly. This won't be an issue in base multiplayer or Warzone, no doubt, but in Champion Hill, you have kind of fixed upgrades for the weapons, so I can't opt out of this one. I'd like to see, at least for FMJ, to not have sparks flying everywhere, because that's particularly annoying. I do want to talk about the audio balance, which I didn't really enjoy a whole lot. I had actually talked to Exclusive Ace and a few other community members that strongly disagreed with me on this one, but Modern Warfare 2019 had super loud footsteps. That was considered unfair, easy. They made Dead Silence a crutch field upgrade, made it very hard to rush, and made Search and Destroy especially hard. So, somewhat wisely, Sledgehammer decided to reduce the overall footstep audio in this game to make it not as punishing for players that want to play aggressively, and that is a design decision that I understand. However, I feel that they went a little bit too far on the other side, so that now if I want to hear footsteps, I have to crank my volume up really loud, and since I'm a sensitive, whiny little baby boy and my ears hurt when I hear loud noises, I don't like to play at a volume where I hear footsteps at normal audio and gunshots are like bombs going off in my ear, and it's like every time I shoot my gun I lose a couple of days of hearing in my old age. I don't particularly want to do that. However, the biggest issue with the audio design isn't necessarily the levels and balance, but rather the map and mode design. So Champion Hill, there's like 3 or 4 different arenas that you kind of rotate through, and it's a survival match, but everybody's playing at different times in different areas of the arena, and they all kind of back up butt to butt to butt to each other. So if you're in a really clutch situation, you're the last guy left, you're listening for footsteps and audio cues, what you're likely to hear is a whole bunch of grenades and guns and bombs and stuff going on some of these other maps, or somebody jumps off a building close to the edge and their knees crack and you can hear that and you think it's an enemy. It's very difficult to hear footsteps when there's all this other stuff going on around Champion Hill, which also doesn't make it very competitive, and that's probably a Champion Hill specific issue. That is unlikely to carry over into 6v6 multiplayer, but it did annoy me. Another thing that, for the most part, I found annoying was the environmental destruction. I didn't find it to be very good or interesting or perhaps important. In my preview videos, I compared it to Rainbow Six Siege, saying that a lot of the destruction I saw was Siege-like, and while I did see maps and other things that are not present here in the alpha, what we do have in the alpha is very, very simple. It kind of reminds me of the planks on the walls that's zombie mode, or maybe some of the more minor destruction that Call of Duty has had in the past. There are lots of little things on the map that pop, that get destroyed, that catch on fire, that blow up, that fall apart, that you can push out of the way to make a little bit more better sightline. And that's nice, but it's not particularly new. I mean, we've had that stuff flying all over the map like paint cans and things since Modern Warfare 2, which is almost 10 years ago at this point. There's just a lot more of it, so it feels a little bit more realistic. But the issue with it is that the destructible walls and buildings are manifested in this game in wildly inconsistent wooden plank mechanics. Sometimes you can walk up to them and melee them and it'll make a perfect body-sized hole and you walk through. Sometimes you walk up to them and you melee them and it makes a little like chest-sized hole right where you hit and you can't walk through because your feet are still blocked. Other times you can maybe shoot through them to create a little hole, shoot through them to create a big hole. Sometimes you can sprint into them and just hit a straight wall and do nothing. Other times you'll walk right through. Sometimes the wall is partially destroyed and you'll sprint into it, but a little piece will be sticking out from its base that you can't hit very easily, so you'll get stuck on a little piece and you can't sprint through like before. Bullets deal oddly low damage when shooting through the planks. I felt like they would be very weak, and since you can, destroy them with one shot, you should be able to like hose people through the walls pretty easily. But for the most part, the planks had more damage resistance and bullet blocking ability than some of the sturdier objects in the game, which were, we'll say, realistically porous. There's a lot of stuff you can shoot through in Call of Duty Vanguard Alpha that, realistically, if you're shooting like a bar, like a heavy light machine gun, not those little fruit stands and cars and stuff aren't going to be sufficient cover. So that's nice, but then those wood planks are just disruptive in a lot of ways. For example, take a look at me on my third game trying to explain to the audience how the plank mechanics work.
One step back,
So the walls you can't walk the walls you can walk through. To me, this isn't very compelling. It's less dynamic than what we've got in Rainbow Six Siege, it's less dynamic than what I've seen in Call of Duty Ghost, and it's certainly not Battlefield-style Levolution. It's also not helpful, and this is going to be unique to the Champion Hill mode, that the boards don't reset between your matches and rotations. So if you have destroyed, let's say, you've made your own like tactical peak, advantage spot or whatever, and you're trying to be concealed but shoot through it, the next time you come back to that map, it's not going to be reset so you can do it again. Some other person's probably blown it wide open, and most people are just enjoying breaking the boards. So within a couple of matches, really honestly after the first match, most of the map is already pre-destroyed and it doesn't reset, so you end up with a very, very open map near the end, which I think does contribute to some of the spawn killing issues as well. Then finally, I don't think Champion Hill is a super interesting mode. I get it that it's an alpha, and this is kind of going to be their replacement for 2v2. I totally admit that it is more compelling and interesting than 2v2. We have more going on there, but it's not something that I'm super hyped for. It's kind of like 2v2 gunfight with CSGO buying mechanics and an emphasis oddly on survival instead of cranking out kills. But I didn't find anything like massively wrong with it, but also not super compelling. I played it and I was like, okay, that's like a, you know, a different take on 2v2 Alpha. That obviously wouldn't hold me for a whole year. I think that the game's going to get a lot more interesting when we get to play 6v6 or ideally bigger modes like, I don't know, 12v12, 18v8, 9v9 or anything like that Black Ops did, or Battle Royale. But for now, this little mode does get very, very repetitive. So that's all of my complaints so far. I realize that some of these are my fault. Maybe I should have bought a PlayStation 5 to play on newer systems instead of relying on my PlayStation 4 Pro. Maybe I am turning into a salty, older, angry gamer that just doesn't like new things. Maybe I'm burned out on Call of Duty and Call of Duty can't impress me anymore. Maybe I'm having difficulties with my medications because I'm still adjusting those from months ago, but I mean, I don't think that's the problem. I think I have a pretty good perspective on myself, but that's the issue with adjusting hormones and medications. It's not always right. Maybe I just started off on the wrong foot. Maybe I was just tired this morning. Maybe something just didn't quite work right. Maybe I'm going to come back and play again later and really fall into a groove of it. Maybe all of that is possible. So for now, I'm just going to keep refining this opinion. I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to keep working on it and trying to learn more about the game. And hopefully, I genuinely hope, this has been a very negative video today, but my genuine hope is that I'm wrong and dumb, or Sledgehammer fixes a lot of this. These problems are unique to an old console, or these problems will all be changed in different game modes. So there's a lot of potential for change, a lot of potential for fixes here, and I hope that it can be improved as we keep moving forward through the cycle, because this is truly just an alpha, and the game doesn't come out for like 2 or 3 months now. We've got a beta to go through. There's a lot of things that can be added and fixed up, and I don't know if Sledge is going to watch this video or do community feedback or whatever, but hopefully that we can get some fixes on some of this. Though I don't know how much the PlayStation 4 can be improved because it's old. All right, guys, that's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.